Hello, my name is Jack Chambliss, and I'm here today to help you with changes in supply and demand and the impact on market equilibrium. This lecture today is designed primarily for my online students, but it's also available for my students in my regular classes and for those of you who have logged on to my website who'd like to learn more about economics and the world around us. So, let us get started. For those of you that are in my economics classes, you'll recall from the chapter on market equilibrium that in the marketplace we have price and quantity, and in equilibrium we have demand intersecting supply, an initial price, and an initial quantity. We talked in the previous chapter, or if you're in my internet class, you read in the previous chapter how if prices are below the market equilibrium, shortages break out, and it leads to the invisible hand, which puts upward pressure on prices to get us to equilibrium. And if the price is above equilibrium, the same invisible hand comes and puts downward pressure on prices, once again to get rid of surpluses and to restore equilibrium. The most difficult chapter I believe students face in macro or microeconomics is what happens when we're in equilibrium but either demand or supply or both change. So increasingly I have discovered that my students in my internet class are very frustrated with the fact that they can read the book and see a snapshot of changes in supply and demand, but they don't really see the mechanics of how supply and demand change, and they don't have me trying to explain it to them live. Also, my students in my regular micro and macroeconomics classes, while they see me go through many examples and also have the book, when they get home, sometimes they go back over it on their own and they struggle with how to shift the supply and demand curves around and what the new equilibrium conditions might be. So this lecture today is designed to do two things. First, it's designed to help me. If we recall Adam Smith, I am self-interested. It is designed to help me read better tests, and it's designed to help you perform better on those tests and know more about how the world works. Just as a footnote to all of this, this lecture today is not going to be edited for grammar or graphs that are slightly sloppy. I'll do the best I can in both areas to be clear and concise, but feel free to email me with any questions or comments or suggestions you have so that if I do this in the future, I'll know how to improve it to serve my students better. All right, to begin, I want to start out with what happens when we have an equilibrium condition and the demand for a good or service increases. So our first scenario is the market is in equilibrium, but for some reason demand increases. You'll recall from your book that a change in demand occurs when some demand determinant other than the price of the good or service changes. Now, in the previous chapter, when we were working through equilibrium analysis, you recall that when the price of a good or service goes up, we become less willing and or less able to buy it, so the quantity demanded for that good or service goes down. And if the price of the good or service goes down, we become more willing and able to buy, so the quantity demanded goes up. But here we're talking about something other than the price. So we're talking about changes in the number of buyers in the market, or perhaps changes in consumer tastes, or income or wealth, or any of the other determinants that you'll need to go back over in your book and review. So let's start with the first example. Whenever we believe that the demand for a good or service has changed or will change, we need to start by asking the first question. And the question is, what determinant or determinants have, or will change, and in what direction? And when we believe demand has in fact changed, you want to label your demand curve D1 to indicate that that is the initial demand curve in this market. Not long ago, I was out with my daughter shopping for a new dog for her, and she had had her heart set on, I believe it was called a Havanese particular breed of dog. So we were in Tallahassee, Florida, at a pet store looking at dogs. They happened to have a Havanese that she liked. It was white, I believe, and they brought it out, and she was looking at it, and I asked the clerk, how much is this dog? He looked at me and said, $2,000. Of course, $2,000 means that something is going on with supply and or demand, so I asked the guy, is it $2,000 mostly because of demand, or mostly because of supply? His response was that it was mostly demand. He indicated that a year or so ago that these dogs had sold for maybe $1,000 or $1,200. But more and more celebrities had been buying these dogs, so that's caused consumers to become more interested in them so they can emulate their favorite celebrities. And now this dog was $2,000, and by the way, my daughter went home without a dog that day. So what's going on in the market for Havanese dogs? Well, first of all, seeing all these celebrities with these dogs has increased consumer tastes for this particular dog. So I'm going to erase this up here for just a moment, and we can identify the first determinant and say that consumer tastes have increased over time. Now, there may be other things at work here too. During the period of time we were looking at this dog, the American economy was relatively strong and incomes were growing, so rising income and wealth could help in this market, and more buyers entering the market could also help as well. But let's just focus on the simplest one and say that consumer tastes have increased. As consumer tastes increase, this doesn't mean the quantity of dogs demanded is going to go up. Remember, the only thing that can cause quantity demanded to go up is if the price of the dogs actually went down for some reason at a sale. Something other than price is changing here, consumer tastes. So, with an increase in consumer tastes, we have the next event taking place in our chain of causation, which is that the demand has increased. An increase in demand can be depicted as follows. Now recall on a two-dimensional diagram, the origin reflects the point where both the price and the quantity would equal 0. So anything moving to the right is an increase, and anything moving to the left is a decrease. So an increase in demand is, and we'll change our colors here for just a moment, an increase in demand is reflected by a rightward shift in the entire demand schedule. All right, let's take a look at what happens next. So suppose 5, 6, 7 months ago, the demand for the Havanese dogs began to increase. And let's suppose that initially the pet stores decided to do nothing about it. Well, at the old price of P1, if we come over to the new demand curve, we see that on this new demand curve, people are willing and able to buy a much higher quantity of these dogs. You'll recall that Q1 is where quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. Now that demand is increased, at the old price there is a new quantity demanded that we'll call QD2. So at a price of P1, people are now willing and able to buy QD2 number of dogs. So the old quantity demanded, we'll just erase that, the old quantity demanded is gone. And at the price of P1, all we have is the quantity supplied, which has not changed, and the new quantity demanded. So we can see that with quantity supplied not changing yet, because the price hasn't changed, according to the law of supply, it takes a price change to bring that about, quantity demanded at the old price is greater than quantity supplied. This is going to lead to, if you recall the previous chapter, a shortage of these dogs. And I hope all of you can read that. So, when a shortage breaks out, recall that the marketplace is now putting upward pressure on the price of this good or service, in this particular case, this dog. So if the pet shops leave the price where it was, we're going to have a lot more people coming in asking for and buying the Havanese dogs. They're not going to have any reason to bring in any more dogs initially because the price hasn't changed. So a whole lot of people in Tallahassee and other parts of the country are going to be coming in saying, where's the Havanese dog? And pet stores around the country are going to say, well, they're all sold out. Well, all sold out is an indication to the pet stores that they can charge higher prices and still have some people willing and able to buy these dogs. And it's also an indication to consumers that when they come back looking for one in the future, that they're going to be more expensive. So, the invisible hand comes in, and now upward pressure on prices begins. So, in step 3, when the demand goes up, the price of the good or service goes up. And as a reminder, if the price does not change, you will end up with a shortage in the marketplace, which is bad for the producer because they don't maximize revenue. It's bad for consumers because they can't find the dog. It's also bad for consumers because they spend a lot of time wasting their time driving around looking for the dogs, making phone calls, spending time on the internet, only to be disappointed that they can't find them. So the marketplace needs to correct for this situation that we have. And the way it corrects for it is very simple. The price over time rises up to the new equilibrium level of P2. Now, at that new price, two things happen that are very critical and that are very exciting to economists. They may be frustrating for consumers and good for producers, or they may be good for consumers in a way, and frustrating for consumers or producers. What happens next is that the higher price signals the breeders of the Havanese dogs and the pet stores to get more of these dogs. So the breeders are going to more actively pursue opportunities to produce these dogs, to breed these dogs, even if it means importing them from other countries. And the pet stores are going to be clamoring to get more of these dogs in because they can get a higher price. So the higher price, if we look at the new equilibrium, the higher price, which brings us to Q2, means, and I'll erase the previous quantity supplied. In the new equilibrium, we see that more dogs are being provided than before. On the supply curve, here was the original quantity supplied. Now, if we move along the supply curve, we can see the new quantity supplied. So that's good news. More dogs are going to show up. But now for the bad news. As the price goes up from $1,000 to, say, $2,000, those people who are either unwilling or unable to buy are going to get weeded out of the market. If you recall in the previous chapter, that's the rationing role of prices. Prices play a discriminating function in this way. It doesn't discriminate based on race or gender. It discriminates based on ability to pay. So those with the ability to pay that still want to buy one of these dogs are going to now face less competition in the market. We see that the higher price, if we're looking at the demand curve, the higher price means that we move along the demand curve and quantity demanded comes down. The shortage is eliminated, and in equilibrium, we have an increase in the overall quantity of dogs supplied. So, to summarize, when the demand for any good or service goes up because of higher tastes or more income or whatever, as demand goes up, over time prices tend to increase and the quantity of the good or service supplied increases as well to get us to our new equilibrium. Let's take a look at our next example. Okay. Not long ago, I read in the newspaper that there's some interesting changes. Let's try a better graph than that, shall we? That there's some interesting changes taking place in the market for low-carb food. We were all probably waiting for this to happen, and it has finally happened, that the overall demand for low-carb food is beginning to drop. As we all know, taste and fashion as it pertains to diet change a great deal, and this has apparently been no different. All right, so let's look at case study number 2 of what happens when the demand for a good or service decreases. All right, fill in the graph here. So we have the initial demand for, say, low-carb energy bars or what have you. The initial supply, we'll label this S. And let's just say that our initial price is, again, P1, and our initial equilibrium quantity is Q1. You'll have to excuse me, I keep pressing the erase button on my marker. It's the first time I've ever used this technology, so I'll try to be a little neater as we go along. Okay. So let's say the marketplace was in equilibrium before this newspaper article came out. Well, what has apparently happened is that, and we'll erase the previous notation, what has happened is that not only have consumer tastes for low-carb food gone down, but the number of buyers in the market has gone down. Number of buyers has gone down as well. Recall that to be a buyer, you have to be willing and able to buy. So apparently people have gotten tired of a lot of the low-carb foods, and the number of buyers in the market is less than it was before. Okay, let's take a look at what that means. When there are lower tastes for a good or service, or there's fewer buyers in the market, as a consequence, the overall demand for that good or service is going to drop. You recall that an increase in demand was a rightward shift in the entire demand schedule, so a decrease in demand is represented by a leftward shift in the entire demand schedule. Well, suppose initially the grocery store say, we don't care, we're going to leave prices exactly where they were. We can see that that would be a big mistake. We were in equilibrium where quantity demanded equaled quantity supplied. That's no longer the case. At the old price that corresponds to the new demand curve, if we come on down, the new quantity demanded on the new demand curve is QD2. So we can erase the old quantity demanded. Quantity supplied, again, is constant because there's been no change in price yet. So at the old price, we have quantity supplied here, quantity demanded here, and so now the points in between the demand curve and the supply curve represent, and I'll try to fit this in, a surplus of that good or service. And the surplus is from here to here. So now the grocery store that had indicated they didn't care about the drop in demand now will have to care because they're going to have their shelves filled with low-carb food that nobody's buying. So the invisible hand kicks in there. As a result of the drop in demand over time, the overall price of low-carb food is going to drop. They'll put it on sale to clear it out. So we have a drop in the price. And as the price drops, ask yourself what you would do if you ran a grocery store. I know if I ran one and people didn't want as much of what I was buying as they wanted before, and it was all sitting on the shelf, and I was having to lower the price to get rid of it, I think I would probably call up the suppliers of this food and say, look, people just aren't buying as much of it as they were before, so I'm going to order less of it. So when demand goes down and you have to lower your prices, over time, the overall quantity supplied is going to drop. And we can see that in the new equilibrium. If we come straight down, that is now, and I'll erase this part here, that is indicated by Q2. So to summarize, when the demand for a good or service drops because of lower taste, fewer buyers in the market, less income, or what have you, over time surpluses will break out. To get rid of those surpluses, prices will start to drop, and with a lower price, the sellers have a lower incentive to bring the products in, so the quantity supplied will drop. Let's take a look at our next example. Okay. Now to changes in supply. A little bit later on we'll do simultaneous changes in supply and demand, but let's focus on changes in supply for now. Undoubtedly, many of you know that 5, 10, 15 years ago, cell phones were not as common as they are today, especially ones that take pictures or let you text message or do whatever it is people do with cell phones these days. Well, now cell phones are everywhere. The poor people can afford them. Some people have 2 or 3 of them, I would imagine. And 15 years ago, cell phones were mostly the purview of the rich. Let's take a look at why poor people have them now as well. All right. So here we have the marketplace in equilibrium with respect to cell phones. We have the initial price and the initial quantity. You recall from the last chapter, or for those of you who aren't a student of mine, but you've been reading my book, that whenever there's a change in the price of a good or service, it affects the quantity supplied. But something other than a change in price has to happen for there to be a change in supply. To review, our supply determinants are input costs, number of sellers serving the market, technology, the price of other goods and services that can be produced with resources used or owned by the seller, and expectations concerning future prices. Well, this is a pretty easy example to consider. Over the last 10, 15 years, several things have happened in the market for cell phones, namely a tremendous increase in technology. Technology is the knowledge of how to produce some good or service, and technological changes have been mind-numbing in the market for cell phones, and DVD players and many other goods as well. Well, as technology has increased, this has dramatically lowered the input costs of production. More companies, let's try to stop hitting the erase button, more companies than ever before are now able to produce these cell phones at fairly low costs. With lower input costs of production, there's been an increase in the number of sellers serving the market. There's a lot more people who have entered the marketplace to produce these than there were 10 or 15 years ago. So, what that has led to in step 2 is a significant increase in the overall supply. All right, so notice we've labeled our initial supply curve S1. And again, any shift to the right is an increase, any shift to the left is a decrease. So let's take a look at what has taken place. In the market for cell phones, there has been a significant rightward shift in the overall supply of cell phones. So erasing the arrow I just drew. With that increase in supply, suppose cell phones still went for the exact same price they were 15 years ago or 12 years ago, or whenever they first started to appear. I have to apologize. I don't know much about them because I don't have a cell phone, and hopefully never will, but that's another story for another day. So at the old price, we have the equilibrium where quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. But now, if we look at our new supply curve, there are a whole lot more cell phones available than there used to be. So hit our erase button. We can go over here and erase the old quantity supplied. Quantity demanded, initially quantity demanded does not change because there's no change in price. So we have on the new supply curve a lot more cell phones available. On the demand curve, since there's no initial change in price, the same number of phones are being purchased at the old price. So if there's a lot more of the product being supplied than there is demanded, obviously this is going to create a surplus of cell phones from here to here. Okay, so what does a surplus do? If you recall, the surplus sends a signal to the sellers that they've got to lower their prices. Clearly, Motorola or Singular Wireless, whomever, they would love to be able to charge the same prices they used to charge for cell phones. Their profits would be enormous because their input costs have fallen dramatically, but they simply can't do that. With all of the new sellers that have entered the marketplace, intense competition has put every one of them in a position of having to lower their prices over time. If they didn't lower their prices, the surpluses would persist for those companies that did not do that. They can actually afford to lower prices and still make a profit because their input costs have actually fallen by a larger amount than they'll have to lower the prices by. So in step 3, to get rid of the surplus, prices will start to drop. Now, where will they drop to? All you have to do is find the new equilibrium between supply and demand, and we'll go back to our original color, and we can see that prices will fall to P2, the new dramatically lower price, and as a result of that lower price, consumers now get to celebrate the opportunity to afford something that they used to not be able to afford, and we can see an equilibrium. If we come down, we now are at Q2. So, erasing this to help avoid any confusion. To summarize, whenever there is an increase in technology or lower production costs or more sellers in a market, whatever the market might be, that's going to lead to an increase in supply, lower prices, and in response to the lower price, remember the law of demand. The only thing that can change quantity demanded is a change in price. In response to the lower price, people are now more willing and able to buy than they were before, and so the quantity demanded increases. On to the next example. Okay. As we're taping this, we're in very early May 2005. I'm not sure how long this tape is going to be used in my classes, but suppose that you're watching this in the spring of 2007 or 2010. And suppose as you're watching this, gasoline prices are $3.05 a gallon or $2.95 or still where they are today, which is about $2.15 a gallon for regular unleaded. Our next example is going to help you understand something that most Americans do not, and that is that there's been some significant changes in supply that has resulted in the run-up in gasoline prices that we've had in the last few years. And this change in supply has nothing to do with OPEC. The oil cartel from the Middle East and Venezuela has had a role in oil prices. But most Americans need to know that there's been some events right here in our own country that has had more of an impact on oil prices and inevitably gas prices than OPEC has over time. So let's take a look. So here we have price and quantity and demand and our initial supply. And let's say that we start out with an initial low price of $1.50. Do you remember those days? So we have $1.50 and an initial equilibrium of Q1 where quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. Okay, here's the dirty little secret about oil markets in the United States. Let's label this guy S1. Over almost the last 30 years, the United States has not seen one refinery built in this country. Recently, President Bush had the leader of Saudi Arabia at his ranch in Texas, and later on President Bush gave a press conference saying that the best way to get oil prices and gas prices down was for the producing countries to produce more oil. I beg to differ, and most economists beg to differ. This is simply incorrect. If everybody in the world that could produce oil doubled their production of oil over time, we would still see high gasoline prices. Maybe they've dropped by the time you're watching this, but for the time being, we would still see high prices because as the oil gets to the United States of America, what's been happening is that without any new refineries being built, all the oil gets here, but then it gets backed up in the refining process. As a matter of fact, not only have we had no new refineries built in almost 30 years, but some refineries have become outdated and closed down. Some of them have closed after fires or mishaps have taken place. So we actually have a situation where there's been a decrease in the number of sellers of gasoline in the United States of America. Mergers in the gas station industry have contributed to this, but the big culprit is there are fewer people selling gas at the wholesale level because we have fewer refineries. Now, check out the internet to discover why we have fewer refineries. You'll see the major reason is lawsuits associated with environmental concerns and what have you. But nonetheless, we have fewer sellers of gasoline than we have before. With less sellers in the market, not surprisingly, the supply of gasoline has dropped, and a decrease in supply is a leftward shift in the entire supply schedule. So let's go back to where we are previously in equilibrium. So we read over from $1.50 to the new supply curve and come down, and we'll label this QS2, and we see how much gasoline is available over time at the price of $1.50. We'll erase the previous quantity supplied. Initially, as gasoline prices do not change, quantity demanded remains the same. But as the supply of gasoline has decreased over time, look at what the result is. You read over from $1.50, here's the quantity supplied. Come over from $1.50 to the demand curve. Here is the quantity demanded. So, with quantity demanded being greater than quantity supplied, if the price did not change, you would see yellow bags all over the pumps at gas stations all over the United States of America, and there would be a shortage of gasoline at $1.50. How are shortages corrected? If you recall, shortages are corrected by the invisible hand putting upward pressure on prices, and we can put $2 a gallon as the new equilibrium price. At least it was equilibrium for a while. And with prices rising to $2 a gallon, naturally, if we look at the demand curve, some consumers are going to respond by buying less gasoline. This, of course, is not a dramatic drop. There has not been a dramatic drop in gasoline consumption. We're still driving Hummers and speeding on the highways and what have you. But some people probably check their air pressure a little bit more. There has been a slight drop in the consumption of big vehicles and so forth. So the law of demand does apply to gasoline. So we'll erase this to give us a little bit of room. And in equilibrium, we're now at Q2. So to summarize, whenever there's a decrease in supply brought on by fewer sellers in the market or higher production costs, which is also part of the refinery problem, That decrease in supply is going to lead to higher prices and a drop in quantity demanded. As a footnote to this, I just want to erase part of this for a second and answer a question that probably would be on the minds of a lot of voters. So we'll give ourselves a little bit of space here. And that is the question, why not just have the government come in and pass a law telling the gas stations that they cannot raise prices? I think we'll erase a little bit more. Make sure we can get this done correctly. Okay. So suppose the government sees that we're currently in equilibrium, and again this is early May of 2005, at $2.17 a gallon, and we're at Q1. And suppose the government says, we don't care that this is equilibrium. We are here to win elections and make people feel better, so we're going to pass a law that sends gasoline prices back to an acceptable level. And suppose, since a lot of Americans actually believe we live in a democracy, we put it to an internet vote and let the majority rule, and we have a vote on the question, what should the price of gasoline be? And suppose the most common vote is 99 cents a gallon. So the government passes a law that says to the gas stations, you may not charge more than 99 cents a gallon. This is known, as you will see in the next chapter, as a price ceiling. It's an artificial limit on what can be charged for any good or service. Well, let's take a look at the mechanics of a price ceiling briefly. If the government imposed a price ceiling of 99 cents a gallon, since it costs the gas stations far more than 99 cents a gallon to get the gas in, many of them would go out of business and would cut back dramatically, or in some cases totally, on the amount of gas supplied. Maybe the new quantity supplied would be a few gas stations staying open just in case the government rescinded the law. The law of demand comes in, and we're going to be a lot more excited and take vacations and what have you, let our cars run longer, and the quantity of gasoline demanded increases. So with the government telling them that you cannot charge more than 99 cents a gallon, notice that artificially quantity demanded becomes greater than quantity supplied, and you guessed it, we end up with a dramatic shortage of gasoline. This is precisely what happened in the early 1970s when the Nixon administration, in response to higher oil prices, decided to impose wage and price controls, and the result was long gas lines for all Americans, something that not too many people are in a hurry to go back to. So be careful what you wish for. If you get it, you could regret it. Let's go on to the next scenario. Okay. So to summarize what we have done so far, it would be very, very helpful if you would maybe draw this box and memorize or learn the following. When the demand for a good or service increases dramatically, when people are rushing in to buy more of it, that causes the price to increase over time, and the sellers say, terrific, we'll now manufacture more of it. When people indicate in the free market they don't want a good or service as much as they used to, demand will drop, surpluses will break out, so the price will drop, and the sellers say, okay, people don't want as much of it as before, so we'll manufacture less of it. When more suppliers enter a market to compete and earn profit, that competition inevitably drives the price of the good or service down, and the sellers say, wonderful, we can now buy more of it. Or if the supply of a good or service goes down for some reason, that's going to inevitably drive the price of that good or service up, and the consumer, I hope I referred to consumers previously, notice it's quantity demanded going up here, the consumer once again responds, and in this case, responds by buying less of the good or service. So if you'll keep these straight and remember what the determinants of demand or supply are, it should help you a great deal as you prepare for the exam or to help you prepare to understand the world. Moving on. Slightly more complicated scenarios that we need to go through now are what happens if supply and demand change at the same time. You'll notice that the book in each particular scenario provides 3 examples of change in supply and demand and varying degrees of change in supply and demand. In some cases, supply changing more than demand and vice versa. In the interest of time and in the interest of having you do the applications on your own, I'm just going to go through one of each of the following scenarios in each case before we wrap things up. Okay, let's take a look at the next scenario. The next example I want to cover is what is going to happen in the market for geriatric healthcare services in the United States of America over the next 20 or 30 years. As you should know, there are currently 76 million people in America who were born between the years 1946 and 1964. They are called the baby boomers. Clean this up just a little bit. These baby boomers are going to be in need of greater health care and physical training, physical therapy, and what have you over time. And this is going to open up an opportunity for many people, maybe even some of you, to profit from this and enter the marketplace to serve them. So let's take a look at what happens when we have a simultaneous increase in demand and increase in supply in a marketplace. All right. So, with more buyers entering the market for geriatric care over time, clearly we're going to have an increase in demand. However, at the same time, we are going to have more people seeing opportunities to make money from geriatric care. This is already beginning. And whether it's physical therapists or personal trainers or whatever the case is going to be, we're going to have more people coming into the marketplace to provide these services. So here we have an increase in demand and an increase in supply. Well, recall, if there's an increase in demand, that drives the price of a good or service up, and the existing providers want to provide more of it. If there's an increase in supply, that competition drives prices down, and consumers want to purchase more of it. Now, the key to keeping this straight when you have a simultaneous change of the same magnitude is to notice in this particular case that the price effects offset one another. If we just looked at the increase in demand, we would see higher prices. If we just looked at the increase in supply, we would see lower prices. But since we have upward pressure on price from the increase in demand and downward pressure on price from the increase in supply, the way we can depict the new equilibrium is to show that over time, these two effects offset one another, so the price stays constant in the long run. However, since we have more people wanting to provide the good or service and more people wanting to buy it, we can see that in the new equilibrium, there's going to be a lot more geriatric care available. Now, of course, if supply changes more or less than demand, we could get changes in prices as well as the equilibrium output, but that's for you to practice on your own. But this is our first scenario. What happens if there's a change in supply and demand where both of them are increasing? Let's look at the next one. Okay. Back to gasoline for just a moment. As you should know, it has not just been changes in supply that have affected gasoline markets. We've also seen an impact on demand. And we can blame China, India, and our increasing appetite for large vehicles in the United States for what's happened to demand. So this is going to be a scenario where the demand for a good or service increases, but at the same time supply decreases. Okay, let's take a look. Over the last several years, as China and India both have begun to pursue free markets, I think I just lost my screen. We're back. I told you that I was new to this. Over the last several years, China and India have both begun to pursue free market economics and capitalism, and that has led to expanded income and wealth in each of these countries. Consequently, the demand for automobiles and the demand for oil from the industrial process has increased dramatically, so we've had a very large increase in the demand for oil from India, China, and as I mentioned to an extent from the United States of America. At the same time, you recall talking about just a few minutes ago, we have had an overall decrease in the supply of oil. And I don't know how my line became wiggly, but I imagine we can still deal with that. Okay, if we have an increase in demand, you know that prices will go up and the existing producers of oil will want to provide more of it. A decrease in supply means that prices increase and consumers will cut back on their consumption just a bit. If we look at the effect of a rising demand with a falling supply on our new equilibrium, and I'll try to clean this up just a bit, okay? In our new equilibrium, we have much higher prices, P2, and P2 could be $3 a gallon by the time you're reading this, as a result of both the change in supply and demand. So notice when demand goes up and supply goes down, prices run together and increase. But notice also, and I'll use my eraser to clean this up just a bit, that we have offsetting effects here when it comes to quantity. The increase in demand encourages more production, which we've seen, but the decrease in supply and the higher prices that come about result in less consumption. So we have one effect leading to more output, one effect leading to less consumption. So in the final equilibrium, notice that the quantity in this case, if they both change by the same amount, the quantity will stay the same, and all we will have are higher prices. The next scenario. Our next example we're going to use is what happens when we have, and this is a rare case, of a decrease in demand and a decrease in supply. So let's take a look. In the market for tuna fish, the government has played a role in creating both of the scenarios that we have here. Several years ago, the government required that companies out fishing for tuna had to provide a more safe fishing environment with respect to the catching of dolphins. Years ago, as the tuna boats would go out and catch tuna, there would be dolphins in their nets, and hundreds or thousands of dolphins were dying. So the government passed new regulations telling Starkist and Bumblebee that they had to provide for dolphin-safe fishing methods. Well, this increased regulation led to higher input costs and a decrease in the overall supply of tuna fishers over time, or tuna fisher persons, or whatever the correct term is. So we have a decrease in supply that has had the effect of driving up the price, and of course would lead to some people eating less tuna. At the same time, from time to time, the government has warned people that eating tuna, that sometimes tuna has traces of mercury in it. Mercury is not good if you're pregnant. It's not good for children. And so as a result of the mercury warnings, from time to time there's been a drop in the consumer taste for tuna, and that puts downward pressure on prices and actually discourages production. Well, notice in this particular case, if we have a decrease in demand and a decrease in supply, the price effects offset one another, but the quantity effects in this particular case run together. So in the final equilibrium, we would have a pretty consistent price compared to the original price, but if this persisted over time, we would see a lot less tuna in the marketplace. And now to our final example. This one is an example of a decrease in demand combined with an increase in supply. And one of the best examples I could think of to describe this scenario is what has happened in the market for VCRs over time. All right, here we have the initial price and quantity in equilibrium. Well, we all know that over the last 10, 15, 20 years, and VCRs, as I'm talking today, are still being produced, we all know that technology has increased dramatically and production costs have fallen. We're back to our cell phone analogy. So this has led to a significant increase in the overall supply of VCRs over time. And I'll carry this on down here. However, at the same time, there has been a large drop in the overall demand for VCRs because we all know that we now have superior technology available. So, with an increase in supply, we get lower prices, and some consumers deciding to equip their kids' room or what have you with VCR technology. But at the same time, the drop in demand also leads to lower prices because of the surplus VCRs that emerge. And the manufacturers, seeing that fewer people want VCRs over time, and some video rental stores not even carrying videotapes anymore, are starting to cut back on the production of VCRs. So when we have a simultaneous, we have a drop in demand and an increase in supply, notice the price effects run together and causes a collapse in prices to P2, and the quantity effects offset one another, where if we do not know the magnitude of the changes, we could maintain roughly the same number of VCRs, but we would just see them be a lot less expensive over time. So to conclude, if you'll take the opportunity to review your book, use this video stream, watch it over and over if you have to, if you can tolerate that, but practice with your own examples, you should be in good shape as you head into the exam. Again, this is the most difficult material students usually face when they're in an economics class, and the more you practice it, the better shape you'll be in as you get ready to take that test. So good luck.